idea that she'd married him. None whatsoever.
The face showed she was happy, but I don't know if she was. From the minute she woke up, she was just shaking all the time.
She said, "I think something bad will happen."
She was suffering badly and not getting the help what she sorely deserved. I love and miss her every single day. I wished I could have done something to help her. She was a good little girl, what I done. When she was born, she was like a little bundle of love with a little cute nose. She had a good heart. And she could be fiery, but obviously things changed her.
When I were growing up after my mum and dad split, yeah, she was single for a very long time. I think she wanted to change. I think as me and my sister got older, she realising we were going to have our own lives like soon and leave home, and I think she wanted someone to be there and be happy.
I think she just wanted somebody to be with her and love her, really. And that's when it started.
Dawn met Nutt on Facebook, and Facebook is predominantly used by Dawn's generation, so that's not particularly surprising. But it isn't that common, I suppose, to form initial connections on Facebook.
She started speaking about someone, a man. We've never met him, never heard anything about him. And I said, well, you need to take it slow. I'm happy for you if you're happy. But just remember, don't rush.
That's when I first seen him. I didn't like him. I spoke to him, I was right with him, obviously, because I didn't know him. Yeah, that was the first time.
But then he just turned up one day and moved in. Never met him previous before he moved in. You could feel the tension rise in the house between me and Thomas, to the point that Thomas himself kicked me out my own home just after my 18th birthday. I decided to go to Egypt and work in hotels because I had no home.
He really isolated her, and that initial period of love bombing is how he did that, because he made her feel so special that she didn't need any of these other people in her life at that moment. And that's a really common thing that we see in these relationships around coercive control, because he's trying to damage those bonds that she has with the outside world so that she's entirely reliant on him.
And it was like a holiday from hell. He started shouting in my mum's face upstairs. He was following her everywhere. And I got tired of it, so I went upstairs and started arguing with Thomas about how he needed to respect my mum. His facial features just changed, his eyes widened, and he pinned me up against a wall. He's then gripped my head and smashed it against the corner of a wall. I just remember the amount of blood that was coming from my head. He then started bombarding my mum with messages saying, you know, Kira was in the wrong, she started the argument.
Nutt was supposed to stay in the caravan all night, but then after everybody had left, she let him back in.
He said that you would be lonely if I'm not there because your kids don't want to be with you.
This is a symbolic attack as much as it is a physical one. That's Nutt sending a message not only to Dawn, but to everyone in her family and social network that you don't want to cross him.
Our Dawn moved to a smaller house. I think he had a lot to do with it, Nutt.
I told her that she either picked her children or picked him, and she chose him. At that time, I thought it was her own choice.
During their relationship, there's obviously also the COVID-19 pandemic. For someone like Dawn, who had a lot of strong connections, that must have been really difficult, especially when she's trapped and isolated in this home with a controlling person like Nutt. It was probably his ideal scenario in a lot of ways.
One of Nutt's exes got in touch with the family to warn us of what he was like, what he was capable of, and to get our Dawn away from him.
The ex-partner told Dawn that she had a restraining order out against Nutt because he'd been so violent to her. It had led to a serious violent attack, and Nutt's ex-partner actually warned Dawn at this point, "Get out, he's going to kill you."
In September of 2020, I remember having a phone call from Mum's number, but it was her next door neighbour saying that Mum was badly assaulted and that I needed to come and see her, help her.
Nutt strangles Dawn. The police are called. She has broken ribs even. It's a really violent attack.
And he was arrested and he got remanded in custody, and my mum was just crying for days.
I don't think I was shocked, no. No, not at all.
She sat down and said, if he comes into the house again, he will kill me. The prosecution said they couldn't prosecute without her evidence. I didn't know that she retracted her statement. She told me she was going to take him back.
It went straight back. Straight back to live with her the same day.
Dawn's been in this relationship with Nutt for a good few years now. She's very reliant on him emotionally, financially. There's all of these different power imbalances at play.
Nutt's personality changed again. So me and him didn't argue for months. It was like a changed man. He had a lot more respect for men, and I think because I had a boy, he liked the idea of another man in the house. As stupid as that sounds. My mum told me that she was going to get married on the 27th of October. And I told her I think it's a little bit too soon.
A few weeks before the wedding, she told me then that they were getting married and she wanted me to be a bridesmaid. I wasn't over thrilled.
The morning of the wedding, she sat down on the bed and she just looked unbothered. She just looked sad. And I asked her what's wrong, and she said, I think something bad will happen.
From the minute she woke up, she was just shaking all the time. When we got into the reception area, we did ask if she was okay and why are you shaking, and she just said she didn't know why she was shaking.
We didn't know that they got married. We hadn't a clue. We had no idea that she'd married him. None whatsoever. It was about 11 months after Nutt came out of prison that they got married. The shock, really. Yeah. The shock.
I got a text message saying, sorry love, I've lost my phone, but can you meet me outside Wilco's at 10:30? So this was on the 31st of October. And she didn't turn up. And I called Nutt to see where she was. And he said, she set off an hour ago. And I said, well, she's not here. My mum was never one to just not turn up. He said, give her 15 minutes. 15 minutes, she didn't turn up. So Thomas came down, put me and my son in the car, and we went looking for Mum.
I was getting messages off Kira to say that they've looked in a specific spot and she wasn't there, so they're moving on. And then get another message to say that she wasn't there again.
We couldn't find her. We went back to Mum's house. I made my son lunch. Thomas said a few weird things, like, I cleaned the house today. The next door neighbour basically forced him to file a missing persons report. And then his whole body language, his whole state changed. He rushed me and my son out the house and drove back to mine to drop me and my child off. He didn't want me being in that house.
And at 5:30, I got a phone call from a family friend. Do you know what's happened to your mum? And I said, yeah, she's gone missing, but I'm sure she'll be okay. And she said, no, Thomas has killed your mum. So I called my sister and said, Mum's dead.
I remember falling to the floor, just screaming.
They said that he strangled her and punched her in the nose, so she had a black eye and a broken nose.
It was just a never-ending list. She had broken ribs, she had a broken leg, she had strangulation marks, a broken eye socket, a broken nose. Her head had internal bruising, black eyes. It was just like Mum was a boxing bag. That's the only way I could describe her injuries.
Of course, I knew it were him. We all knew.
I didn't know any details about what happened apart from my mum was in a suitcase in a field. He got home from the wedding day and he just attacked her for some unknown reason.
He puts her body in a cupboard so he doesn't have to look at it.
When he went to Skegness for them 2 days, he went on his own and left Mum.
It's almost like whilst on honeymoon, Nutt was working out his next steps. So he goes back to their home and then he texts from Dawn's phone, Kira Lee, her daughter, asking to meet up. Dawn never arrives, and it's only at that point that Nutt says that Dawn has gone missing. She'd actually been dead for days by this point.
He took her around, running her around knowing that, you know, Mum was already dead.
So now that I know what happened when I was in Mum's house feeding my son, she was in the cupboard. And we wasn't even 2 meters apart.
He tried to delete the CCTV footage, what they had around the house, but clearly he didn't delete everything, and I think the police retrieved a lot of the footage from the cameras.
We had to go to Bradford Crown Court for the trial. So I was nervous to see him, and then when I got there and I actually saw him and he was like smirking and laughing, I was just angry and upset and disappointed that he would do that. One of the self-defense stories was when they came back from the honeymoon, he went to the shop, and when he came back, she was stood there with a knife. And then one of the other self-defense stories was when they came back from the wedding, Mum said something like, oh, I'm still married to my ex-husband, so I'm not married to you. So he put his hand over her mouth to stop her talking.
Back in my mind, I think I were always worried. You know, you just want the best outcome ever, don't you?
We were sat in a little family room in like the witness area, and all we could hear on the speakerphone was Thomas Nutt, court room 3, and we all ran. And I don't think I've ever ran so fast in my life.
You can never be definite of what can go down in the courts.
The juryman stood up and said, guilty. And we all cheered. We all said thank you. And he stood up in court, Thomas, and said, fuck you. And he had to get removed from the courtroom. And he got handed a 22-year sentence, but with his remand time knocked off, it was about 21 years.
To be honest, I'd have liked him to get a lot longer, but they said that was the highest sentence they could give because he'd handed himself in as well, and they have to take that into account.
I started to cry. I don't know if it was happy or sad tears. They just kept falling and falling.
She was suffering badly and not getting the help what she sorely deserved. There's no words for him. There isn't. I hate him.
You know, I lost my best friend, I lost my mum. I lost my son's nana. My nana, She basically cries every day. You know, my sister struggles to sleep. We're still a close family, but there's always a piece that's going to be missing. And I don't think anyone's life will ever be the same.